So this is the agenda that we are going to be following. So there are three main sections. I think we can divide this presentation into. It's before the interview, so I'm going to be giving you some tips like information gathering, like do some position background check, company background check, study for whatever you find it's going to be needed. Ask for topics. I'm going to elaborate more on that in the next slides. The second section is during the interview. So there is a thing that I find really important that is like shaping who you are through your body language. There is a TED talk that I think I included the link of that TED talk in here about, there is this very popular phrase, fake it till you make it. So I saw that a while ago and found it interesting enough to be put in here. Another part of that during the interview phase, it's turn the tide to expose our strengths. I'm going to elaborate more on that. I think that's one of the most important things. So if you only get one thing out of this presentation, I think that needs to be it. Talk about contributions is something that I'm going to try to like dig deep into. And by the way, this is in Spanish. I'm sorry, I was going to tell you at the beginning, I originally made this presentation in Spanish, and then I translated it because I figured I had to give it in English. So if you see anything in Spanish here, I'm sorry. Here it's closing the interview. So it's basically how may I begin, like asking certain questions to make the person that's interviewing you feel that you are interested in helping their team not only get something out of them, like how may I begin making contributions faster, and some other assertive questions like that. So with that being said, let's get started. This is chapter 1 before the interview. I guess we've been in a position like all of us because we're here, so we have been interviewed at one point, right? And so there is this sort of I don't know, pre-interview nervousness that might or might not occur, because you normally get either contacted by someone that you're going to be having an interview, or maybe you applied to a position and they reply back to you and they tell you you have an interview set up. So what I would do, and something that I do recommend to you, is gather information. First off, ask what the position is, some company background check if the company was the one that reached out to you. For example, I think it was my case in Grid Dynamics that I was approached by like a sourcing company, and so I was in other processes already when I went through this interview, but this was the company that I liked the most. And that's because I did like a sort of company background check. And so that's important, right? You want to go to a place that's stable and maybe, you know, that aligns with your values or your principles. Like I wanted to work with like high level engineers. So that's very important. This seems obvious to some, but you would be surprised how many people don't think that studying before an interview might make a difference. I don't think I've gone through an interview in a while without like going back into certain topics and, you know, revisiting some of the concepts that maybe I already know them, but it's not the same knowing the topic than, you know, being able to answer it in an interview setting. So starting is important. Don't overlook it. If you guys do it, just ignore that. But if you don't, make sure that this might make a world of a difference. Another thing that I added in here is ask for topics. So whoever has helped me here through like Grid Dynamics interviews with clients might know that I bug them. Like I consistently ask them, what are they going to ask me, interview me about? What are the topics? I'm going to be very straightforward with this. I almost never get a straight answer on the topics that I'm going to be like evaluated on. But I think it's very important to ask just in case, if the person can give you some sort of like, you know, summary of what topics they're going to be asking you in the interview, that might be a speed bump in, you know, all the starting process. So even though I haven't had much success on this one, I still do it every time, and you know, who knows, it might make a difference one day. This is very important here, by the way. I added this bonus. It says get the recruiter on your side. So what this means is, let's imagine, let me give you a fun example about this one. Well, I'm just going to tell you the following. So in a few of the interviews that I've gone through, I almost always try to like understand that the recruiters are normally going through a phase of finding the right candidate. And so what they want is to fill that position. When I talk to other engineers, they make the process seem like the recruiter would be trying to filter you out, when in reality, I think it's quite the opposite. So once I read in a book something, I think it was like more like a dating sort of chapter on a book about like habits that I was reading, but it was saying something like everyone wants to fall in love. So basically what that means is that, you know, when you are using like dating apps, apps for, you know, finding someone to go on a date with, you normally don't think, oh, I hope this person is horrible, right? Like you normally want the person that you're going on the date with to be really to really match your expectations. And so I think that's really important to take into consideration. Like normally when you are approached by a recruiter, they're really hoping deep inside that you are the right person. So if you can get that person to help you get prepared for the interview, I'm sure they will, for sure. Like just get them on your side. And yeah, a lot of benefits on that. So I don't know if you guys have any questions before I move to the next chapter. Anyone?
All good. Thank you.
All right. Good. Thank you. So chapter 2, during the interview, just as important as before the interview, if not more important. I think it's more important, right? Because you're in the interview already. All right, so this is the chapter that I'm going to like expand on a couple of anecdotes, if I can remember any. Hopefully I will. So before I dive into the anecdotes, I guess I would like to talk about these TED Talks that I watched a while ago. It's by Amy Cuddy. I think that's a pronunciation, the right pronunciation of her name. And it says something like your body language might shape who you are. And so she talks about a few things that honestly at first didn't work for me, but I guess I just misunderstood them at first. And so when I went, I guess through a process of, you know, practicing that over and over, I started understanding more and more what this was. So I'm going to talk about what didn't work for me and some things that she talks about, and then I'm going to talk about what worked for me. Hopefully it'll be fun for you guys to listen to those stories. So let's see. All right, so one of the things that she talks about in one of her TED Talks, and by the way, I just recommend you to go watch them if you have some time. She talks about like certain like body language things that might or might not empower you to feel a certain way. She talks about certain things like, you know, it's a very human thing through all cultures to raise your hands when you win a contest or when you feel like empowered, I guess that's a word. sorry, someone was going to say something? No? Okay. Yeah, so she talks about how those things are like part of humanity, I guess, quote unquote, for a reason, right? And so she even like goes as far as suggesting that you go to a room and raise your hands before going into an interview and stuff like that, so you can feel uh through body language, walking to the interview like confident and all that. uh, I tried that once. It didn't work for me, to be honest with you. But then, like a few years after I failed that interview back then, uh, I was in a business trip with one of the companies that I worked for, and I was with a manager that I respected a lot. And so the guy was really, I felt that he was trying to connect with the team while we were there. Um, and just the conversation wasn't flowing, and I was trying so hard to talk to him, and things just feel awkward at the moment. And so then another guy from another team, but from Mexico, because we were in the US back then, walked into the restaurant where we were and sat just next to me, and he started talking to the manager, just really really fun. I just started watching their conversation. It was really fluid, and it was very natural, and it felt refreshing. So I was like, why couldn't I get this guy to talk to me in the same way that they're talking? And so I noticed one thing that was very very different between the guy that was being able to talk and myself. And it was just like I had this. Let me move the camera here. I had this phase like frowning my eyebrows, like I was really worried. And then I was talking to the guy like, yeah. And so what's next and stuff. And so the other guy that was being able to make the conversation was smiling all the time. And so it seemed like everything he said was funny, even though it wasn't, or maybe it was, but the tone, by looking at his expressions of everything he was saying, felt like he was enjoying being there, instead of having a hard time and having this face and stuff. And so I started noticing that that works, and that's basically like instantiating a likable personality through your body language. In my case, it was just smile a bit more during the interview and stuff. And so I started to notice, like in technical interviews, um, when you have this preoccupied face and stuff, like this, when people are asking you stuff, they ask you like, so tell me the types of exception handling in Java. And then you have this face and you say like, I think there are two, and you don't, you just don't transmit like that you're having a good time and that you enjoy your career and stuff. And so it's very different to not know things but be smiling. And maybe you say something like, oh, I don't remember which, maybe you were talking about this one, and smiling through all it and making it like a conversation, instead of as I said, looking like you're having a really bad time in the interview and having this face of suffering and stuff. So that's really important for me. Like, I can not tell you how much that changed uh, the, I guess, interviewing experience for me. As a matter of fact, after some interviews, like 3 or 4 times, people have told me like, oh, I really enjoyed doing an interview to you. It seemed like you were having a good time. And so maybe I didn't do as good in the interview, like on the technical topics, but I guess at the end of the day, if the interviewer enjoyed spending those hours with you in there, he might consider you to have an edge over other candidates. So that's kind of important for me. I'm going to move to the other side as well. All right, so another technique that I think it's really important is turn the tide towards our strengths. I hope that's properly translated. I had it in English, but it's basically, I'm sorry, in Spanish originally. But it's basically, think outside of the box. When you're being interviewed, what people really want to know is your experience. They want to know what you're good at. And the way they have to find what you're good at is ask you questions, right? They cannot just tell you like, oh, tell me what you're good at. I mean, they have to ask you specific questions that they might think are important. But sometimes, I'm saying sometimes because it very dependent on the situation. Um, I'm going to say a lot of the times, those questions are just a box of like confined space of knowledge. If you think outside of the box when they ask you something like, I don't know, tell me how would you uh, this Spring Boot functionality or something that you don't know about, like annotations or whatever. And then you might say like, I'm a Java guy and I don't know Spring Boot, but I do know all these other things. And then you say something like, I'm not sure about Spring Boot. However, I have extensive knowledge on uh, Java Enterprise and, developing, Java Enterprise, Java Beans or whatever. I'm not sure. So if you really can convey what your knowledge is on this other topic that you're really strong, the person might say like, okay, um, he doesn't know Spring Boot that well, but all the knowledge that he has, it's worth years of experience. So I'm not going to ditch this candidate because he doesn't know this one thing really well, when he has this other extensive knowledge and background that might take years of acquiring. And maybe those Spring Boot things that he does not know might only take, I don't know, 8 months maybe after using it, because he has this other chunk of knowledge that's really significant. So whenever you don't know something, and this is something that I tell you because I have this friend that's really good at Java. And so when he goes in interviews, he doesn't do as good as I would expect because he's really, really, really good. And he just answers no to things that he doesn't know. Like, do you know this functionality or have you done this? And he says, no, I haven't. And it's just like, no, I haven't, but I have, you know, done these other extensive things that are quite similar. Maybe it's a different tool or a different approach to resolving the same problem. So turn the tide towards our strengths. It's really important there. Not sure if you guys have any questions, or may I continue?
Yeah, all good.
Good. So another very valuable tip here is periodically check on the interviewer. So I've done interviews myself, not as many as I would like to, but I have done interviews myself. And it's really annoying when, when you ask a question to a candidate and they keep going and they're not even close to answering what you're asking them. I don't mean to sound rude to the candidates, but it's really annoying because sometimes they would like talk 5, 7, 8 minutes straight and they're not even answering what you want to know. So something that I found really important and valuable is to periodically check on the interviewer. So if they ask you something, just try to time box your answers to 1 minute. If you really need to elaborate more than that, just keep asking. Are you okay with that answer? Is this the answer you're looking for? Did I understand your question correctly? Those things, like they ask you a technical thing about the cloud, and then you're like, oh, well, I think it is like this. And after like 30, 45 seconds of talking, am I going to the right direction, or you want me to elaborate on a different side of the topic or something? This is really good because sometimes maybe you are the right candidate for the position, but if you annoy the person that's asking you stuff and they're like, oh, I just want to get out of here because this guy won't stop talking, um, it just makes the experience worse. And I guess the interviewer will end the interview, although you were technically good, thinking that he didn't enjoy it, and maybe that perceived experience lowers points on your rating or whatever. So, oh, another thing in Spanish. I'm sorry, guys. Uh, what says in there? what I wanted to say in there, it's talk about contributions. So sometimes, I'm going to try to say this in English the best I can, because I'm obviously not talking my first language. So I've seen people asking, what did you do in your last position? And then a lot of people would go and say very, very technical things that don't really say anything. Like, oh, we used a framework by Oracle to um, utilize an e-commerce site, and so I was developing the AR component on the Dynadmin platform to, and that's like, I don't even know what that is. Like, normally when you're talking, like, there are millions of frameworks, and maybe the person that's interviewing, performing the interview on you, wouldn't really know if that's good or that's really simple to do. So talk about contributions better. We all know that helping reducing costs is better than, talking about 100 components that you did for, a company, and you don't even know if they use it or not. So stuff like that. Just try to talk about contributions, reducing incidents through, site stability, through this monitoring tool that I implemented, or that I wrote certain functionalities for, stuff like that. So for example, one thing that I use myself, just to give you a concrete example, I spent some time as a junior Java guy. I don't remember much about Java anymore, but I remember one of the tasks that I was asked to do was help on online orders from an e-commerce site. For some reason, the guys at the fulfillment center couldn't process some of the orders. Like, they went and scanned the order, and it says that the order is locked. So I will go and check into the order, and started noticing that there were some patterns on the orders that got locked. It was very basic stuff, like some character. Well, the address exceeded the amount of characters that the legacy system can take, for example. And so how did I do that? Well, I created an app, like a Spring Boot, I think it was, where you would put the order number, and it will show you all the relevant fields. And then that way I would filter out which ones were the address issue. So I could go and fix those manually. And so when I get asked about certain questions, I talk about, well, I helped reduce failed orders by 85% on an e-commerce site, on a large e-commerce site, through certain applications for forecasting orders that fails and stuff like that. That's a really specific contribution, other than talking about which components you used and which frameworks and the Maven commands you used to build your project and stuff, right? I added like a sort of bullet point there about humor, like sense of humor. It's just because at one point I was interviewing a guy about, I think it was Kotlin, for like sort of Android development. I didn't know much about it, but I asked him a question and he laughed, and then he started like really, I guess, deeply, I don't know how to say that, talking about the reason why he preferred certain things over other things. So through him laughing, I understood that, he had some extensive knowledge, or at least some experience dealing with certain things that might get complicated during the development. And so I gave him a check mark in that scenario, because I think we can only laugh about what we understand. That's sort of a thing that I added there in the presentation. It's also a double-edged sword, I guess, because you can be perceived as mocking or laughing about the question. So use that with care, I guess. Let's see what else. So chapter 3, before we go into that, anyone wants to share something, make a question or anything?
Not for the moment.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's all good.
I'm also having lunch, by the way.
Aprovech.
Sorry about that. Let me just finish chewing. All right, so chapter 3, for closing the interview. I think that this might be the least important of them all, but it's still sort of make or I don't know how to say that, make or not make. I mean, you can do good in an interview, and then at the end, if you don't ask the right questions, you might, some points or screw it up. So I thought about adding these. Um, a couple of things that I think are important is just try to find some early contributions to make. Normally, and I've seen this a lot, when people get interviewed, we tend to think that we are the ones getting the benefit. And so what the company expects normally is for you to want to help them with something. That's really how it is for them. I mean, obviously they want to pay you and have you long time and stuff, but if you ask more like, how do I think my profile, or based on the interview that we just had, do you see anything that I could contribute to early on in the project? And so maybe they'll go about a couple of things or just perceive you as a person that's ready to go. So that's one of the good questions to ask, I guess. Um, Also try to find out what profile they're looking for. Like, based on what we talked about, do you think I'm the right candidate for this? I feel that and obviously, if you do want the position, because it's not always the case, I just want to make that clear. Um, there are, I guess, very senior engineers that might tend to get more picky about the project that they get like added into. But for the majority of us, we normally are happy with whatever we are being offered. And so what I would say, it's something like, I feel that I match really well with the project based on what we talk about. Am I the profile you're expecting to have? And, stuff like that, just so that the person can elaborate and even set expectations for you. Because once, for example, I felt really good about an interview. It was like with a French company or something. And so everything was going well until I asked that question. And then I figured out that they wanted to have like an on-call guy that might be available maybe through all the day and even the weekends. And so I would have taken the job, but it really plays them lower in the rankings when you know that you're going to be asked to do things that maybe are not as cool. So as I asked that question, and then they were like, "Oh, we're expecting to have a person that will be available all these hours and be on call," and I was like, "All right, good that I asked." So it's a both way mutually beneficial question, I guess. Um, Another thing that I found people get really cool about, or they like to be asked about, is assertive questions like business questions about the company or day-to-day related. Like, there was this guy that interviewed me once, and so things were going well, but they went extra well when I asked them how his day-to-day was and how he started working for that position, because his background didn't seem to fit what position he was covering. And so he started to get really excited about, how he moved careers. He switched careers, I'm sorry. He even shared his screen and told me what he was doing at the moment and stuff. And so sometimes, um, showing that you care about the human side of things might also be a good idea. Obviously, each person will be different here. So just ask, how's your day today? And maybe some business questions like how many people are on the team, or how are the different teams divided? What tasks do they perform? And just try to make note. I would normally, for technical interviews, because it's different for all the positions and also for the different phases of the interviewing process that we are into. But I would avoid asking questions about like what benefits are your company offering, or you know, I would just save those for the next steps. Next steps meaning like, you know, the executive interview with higher ranked people if you ever get to go there. Because normally the people doing technical interviews wouldn't know much about what you're going to be offered. So it'll just create like an awkward 30 seconds of conversation, I guess. I'm almost done. Yeah, I think I'm done actually in record time. What time is it? 12:45. So I think that's it for me, guys.